Grand Forks Growth Fund Committee meeting. We'll begin with roll call, please.
Prairie. Mr. Prairie, are you here?
Here.
Thank you. Dockler. Wolf. Kvamme.
Yep.
Weber.
Here.
Whitney.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Thanks, everyone. And our first order of business is approval of the minutes from the December 21st meeting. There's no discussion. I'd be looking for a motion. Move approval.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Kvamme, a second from Mr. Wolf. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thanks, everyone. Item 3 on our agenda, Corporate Center 2, the Kitsona lease. Ms. Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. As you may recall, Kitsona's lease in the corporate center expired at the end of last year, and a proposal was submitted to extend that lease. The terms proposed were an all-in rent price of $2,000 a month for 2 years, with a monthly payment of $500 toward the outstanding balance. When this was brought to committee, the Growth Fund established a subcommittee to help work through the negotiations and options with this. That committee consisted of members Jonathan Holt and Kyle Kvamme. That subcommittee met on December 18th and produced some recommendations, fairly detailed. They're outlined in your staff report, but in brief, their recommendation was that the estimated monthly payment would be approximately twice what Kitsona had proposed. The recommendation was approved by Growth Fund Committee and submitted to the JDA for action on January 4th. However, that was tabled at that time because Kitsona had advised City Attorney Dan Gostad that those recommendations would not be possible for them to meet. Subsequently, they submitted a settlement proposal of approximately 20 cents on the dollar. Mr. Gostad reviewed the financial documents that were submitted by Kitsona and also created the settlement agreement and promissory note that were associated with their proposal. He does recommend settling for that amount, and I would defer to Mr. Gostad if you have any questions on the particulars of either the amount or the documents to memorialize this, but the recommendation is to accept that settlement. That would then be the monthly payments on the outstanding balance would be at 5% interest with payments of $1,000 a month from March 1st of this year through March 1st of 2023. And that would allow Kitsona to remain in the building through the end of February to complete their liquidation and remove their inventory.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Richards. Any questions for Ms. Richards or for Mr. Gostad from committee members? Mr. Kvamme, by the way, Kyle, thanks for your service on that ad hoc committee.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it was enjoyable for anybody involved, but needed to happen. And so I just have a question. Their current agreement has them out of the lease at the end of January. Is that correct? Or the current extension? Or when? At what point is their current contract up with us?
Correct. Their current lease runs through the end of this month, just a few days. And so this item will go directly to the JDA for action tonight so that it can be acted upon while their lease is still in effect.
And do we know the current use of that space through February and why it's being requested for an additional month and what activity is taking place?
Mr. Gostad, would you care to?
Yeah, Councilmember Kvamme, the Kitsona's attorney had contacted me and they wanted an additional month to basically wind down their business. Give them that additional, I guess it's only 28 days to get that accomplished. So that was the rationale.
And are they open for business?
As far as I know, they are.
Or?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. As far as I know that, but I don't shop there, so.
Yeah, I guess that's my only question is if they're asking for the month, is it truly open for business? And is there the ability to recoup at least some sales tax opportunity there. But if we don't have any information, I guess I don't have any recommendations otherwise.
Mr. Wolf, yes.
Yes, Mr. Chair. A few questions, and thank you to those that have been involved thus far, and Mr. Gaustad for your recommendation. More questions. How did we arrive at the settlement amount?
It was proposed by Kitsona, and it's also consistent with what we did with the Ann Love as well. And the other thing is I did look at their financial records, and from my view, based upon what existing matters that are outstanding, I thought 20% seemed a reasonable amount that they'd be able to pay back.
Okay, how much of that would be paid up front?
How much of what? The
Of the settlement amount, or is it all paid over the 2 years? Is
it's
there anything
paid out
upfront?
it's paid out over the 2 years. It's $1,000 a month commencing on March 1 of 2023, or excuse me, 2021.
Okay, thank you. If I understand, to make those payments, it's like, as Mr. Kwame had said, what's the source of that repayment? Will Kitsona still exist? Are they going to exist for these 2 years, or is that going to just come out of personal assets? What's the source of that repayment during the next 2 years?
I don't know this for certain, but I understand that they may be moving to a different location, or at least exploring that avenue. But the way the promissory note sets up is it's joint and several liability, both for the limited liability company and Ms. Heine. You got to remember that the current lease is only with the limited liability company. So in effect, Ms. Heine is providing a guarantee on at least the promissory note that we don't now have.
Okay.
And they continue to do business in Fargo as well.
Okay. And so then maybe that's the answer to my final question, Mr. Gaustad, but so if in the event of default on this agreement, it appears that Kitsona, the entity, would be liable for 100% of the unpaid accrued rent, and Ms. Heine would be liable for 40,000 or up to 40,000. Is that the understanding?
That's correct, and that was based upon discussions I had with Ms. Heine's attorney. So what happens is, under the terms of the settlement agreement, this unpaid and accrued rent remains outstanding, and it only gets relieved if they perform under the terms of the promissory note. If they do not, then the limited liability company is liable for the full amount, less the principal, any principal payment we may have received, and Ms. Heine is liable up to the $40,000 amount.
Okay. And again, currently she's not, before this agreement, she's not liable personally, but we would add her to that extent. That's the plan. Is that correct, Mr. Gaustad?
That's correct. The way the lease is set up, it's only with the limited liability company.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Yes, Mr. Gavami, please.
And I think just to tack on what Mr. Wolf was stating, I don't think that anyone is particularly happy about these settlement terms, and I think that the agreement with Ann Love has set a precedent that we have to now honor. I'm just excited to get out of the business of leasing commercial space. I think this is another example of why the city doesn't need to be involved in this. So that's all. Thanks.
For a quick editorial, the flood put the city in a situation where we were kind of unavoidably landlords. Over that 20-year period, we've had a very successful run, and perhaps you're meaning retail space rather than commercial space, but either way, at this point, I'd be looking for a motion, if there are no further questions, to authorize execution of the settlement agreement.
Mr. Weber?
Please.
Sorry, Dana Sandy, in
Mr.
council
Sandy,
chambers. I have maybe a simple question. We're talking about extending their lease for 1 month at their current terms, but then are only going to collect 20% of that month's lease? Is that how this math worked out?
Mr. Gaustad?
believe that to be, I'm just trying to find the, yes, that's correct, is under the current terms that they pay that amount, and then the deferred amount got added to the 115,000. That's how we came up with that, the
Sure.
total unpaid amount.
So, what's that dollar amount?
They pay $2,000 a month, and then approximately, is it about $2,400 a month is deferred?
Okay, so why, if they made an offer to us for $2,000 a month for 2 years plus $500 a month towards outstanding balance, why aren't we adding $2,000 to the actual amount that they owe us? Rather than some 20% of, according to the staff, I'm reading the staff report, right? On November 23rd, Growth Fund Committee, blah, blah, blah. Kyle Kawami was asked to review it. Consona's all-in proposal requested an all-in rent of $2,000 per month for 2 years plus payment of $500. I mean, if they were offering to pay us $2,000 a month and we're going to extend them another month, why don't they actually write us a check for $2,000 or add that to the balance of what they're going to pay us?
And maybe Mr. Sandy, I may not be clear. As I understand, they have to pay the rent for February.
They actually have to pay the rent for February.
Correct.
I'm sorry.
Correct.
I misunderstood that.
Yep, and actually, if they don't perform under the, not only under the terms of the promissory note, but in the terms of the settlement agreement, then everything
comes out, okay.
115,000 and the 40,000. So they've got an obligation to fulfill under the terms for
Thank
the
you.
lease too.
Appreciate it. I misunderstood. Thank you, Mr. Weber.
Thanks for the question. Anything further? You're looking for a motion?
Move
Hesitation
approval.
to make a motion. We have a motion from, I'm sorry, who's the motion from?
Move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Kavami. Hoping for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Whitney. We have a motion from Mr. Kavami, a second from Ms. Whitney. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. This is a recommendation that goes forward to JDA, and we've moved up JDA's schedule so that this can be taken care of. Motion is approved. Very good. Moving to our next item. Item 4, the Startup Grand Forks Loan Program. Item A is a program update, including a modification. Ms. Richards?
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Yes, this agenda item consists of 3 parts. I'm going to cover the program update modification, and then the remaining 2 applications I'll hand off to Mr. Baumbach to present. In terms of the requested modification, last September, this group and the JDA approved making the startup program a permanent part of the JDA's portfolio. It was a pilot program that was launched in 2017. And originally, it was set up with the idea that JDA would support 50% of the project. BND, Bank of North Dakota, through the North Development Fund, would have a 25% convertible equity stake, and then the borrower would have 25%. When the program update was provided in September and the program was made permanent, we were in a bit of a transitional period with BND in that North Dakota Development Fund had opted out of the program. And since that time, we've been in continuing conversations with BND. They continue to be very supportive of the program and have offered some options to continue to provide that 25% stake. However, there's some kind of logistical issues in terms of their lending institution requirements and our process as a non-lending institution. So with some support from city leadership, the recommendation is to continue to offer the program, but replace the BND or Development Fund share of the program with local funding, so that the JDA share would then be 75% of the project and borrower equity 25%. This is perhaps not ideal, but given the size of our portfolio, it's certainly, we have the ability to do this. And based on conversations with finance staff and others, this seems to be the simplest and most streamlined for all involved. So that's part one of the recommendation. Assuming you agree with that, then we would ask that two actual startup loans that were approved in that kind of transition period, one was to Tacho Man and the other to Thunder Rays, would be to allow us to retroactively apply these ratios to those loan documents and amend those loan documents to reflect this new approach. And then going forward, this would be the ratio that we would share with future applicants, and other loans going forward would be under this method.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Richards. Any questions for Ms. Richards on item 4A? Yes, Ms. Whitney, please.
Wondering if Ms. Richards or Mr. Bombach would know, just with the change in the percentages, how much faster do we think we have an idea of how many fewer, or how we would spend out the fund any faster with the new percentages if the increase is on the JDA side, if there's a difference there that we might see or could anticipate?
Well, before you get your answer, I'll point out that with a soft cap of $150,000, here we have two loan applications today coming to us. We'll be approving 60 of the $150,000 potentially.
Yep.
So it seems to be, this has been a successful program with some growing momentum. But Ms. Richards, anything to add to that, or Mr. Bombach?
Well, you're on the right track, Mr. Weber. We would increase that soft cap to allow for this increased ratio, so it wouldn't really affect the timing of the funding. You're right, we are spending it down here in the first month of the year. We would have about 40% of the year's funding allocated. So that soft cap, we might very well be coming to you in a few months asking if you want to harden that cap up or extend it.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Wolf, please. Yes.
Along those same lines, so so I know that we'd look to increase the per loan amount from 20,000 to 30,000. The soft cap we're referring to of 150, is that an annual funding?
That's
correct. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, refresh. Thank you. Where are we at? What is outstanding right now? I know that there was some detail with, I think, 12 loans, but what is the principal balance outstanding right now, and are they performing as agreed?
Let's see, we've been doing this for 3 years now. Is that correct, Ms. Richards?
Correct. There is a listing in your staff report of the 12 that we have funded, and it's marked which ones are active or still in deferral. You know, I don't have a dollar amount off the top of my head, but to date, our default rate is 0, which is excellent. You know, that could change at any time, and we certainly expect COVID to perhaps have an impact on that, but so far, so good.
I did see that in the staff report, and I'm fine proceeding. I would just appreciate in the future, when we have that, putting some numbers by it, just so we have an understanding as a committee of what types of dollars are in these programs, and I'd appreciate that in the future.
We can certainly make that part of all future requests. We can include kind of a summary of where we are. Thank you, Mr. Wolf. We'll do that.
Thank you.
And of the 12, those are over the last 3 years. Not all of those maxed out the ask. In fact, I'm guessing several of them were much less than the full ask. And of course, 2 of those we're just finishing up on today. Yeah.
Right, and our first one was repaid almost immediately.
Yes, Mr. Curry.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, is there also, do we have a cap on the total portfolio amount? So I mean, obviously by definition, these will get repaid, so it should naturally refund, but is there a total if we, I know an annual, soft cap of 150, but if there's a lot more, it gets a ton of traction and we want to grow it, and is there a hard number for the total portfolio size of an outstanding loan balance, or?
We have not established anything of that nature to date.
Currently there isn't, but a quick overview of what we're doing today. We started out with that very tough discussion about Kitsona. Now we've got a modification to the growth fund, then some loan applications that are exactly the type of loans that we were looking for when we first developed this program. And then our final item today is that expansive discussion about how do we want this, our work to proceed in the future. and that's the kind of thing that we'd be looking for further discussion on. But at present, there isn't a cap for the total on that.
Correct, and it isn't even necessarily treated as a revolving loan fund. You know, as we've said, there's an annual budget amount, but we don't rely on proceeds from past loans to fund future loans.
Any further questions about item 4A? Otherwise, I'd be looking for a motion to approve that modification to the program.
I'll move to approve.
Very good. We have a motion from Mr. Crary and a second from Mr. Wolf. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Bombach, items 4B and 4C, starting with application from Software 701 LLC.
Thank you, Chairman Weber, members of the committee, Brandon Bombach, Director of Business Development at the Grand Forks Region Economic Development Corporation, and exciting program, and thank you so much for the continued support of Startup Grand Forks. It's been a real pleasure of my work. And for companies such as these, Software 701, we have two members on the call with us today, Kyle Solarud and Nolan Nordland, who are bringing this application forward. It's just a great story. They met at the 701 co-working space. They had two different business plans, but when they came together, they found innovation in a brand new product and a brand new company. Software 701 is really streamlining online marketing, putting together a suite of tools to help advance YouTube and Google advertisements through a proprietary algorithm. I'll get out of the way because that's about the extent of my knowledge on it, and let them do the explanation, a short presentation on that, and then I'll follow back up with the financial request.
Very good. And anyone who's gone into 701 over the last couple of years, these will probably be familiar faces. Mr. Nordland, Mr. Solarud?
Yeah, I'll take it with a brief explanation of what our company is doing. So we founded Software 701 in August, and we are primarily building research tools related to Google Ads and YouTube Ads. So we have two existing pieces of software that we moved into the company. One is called AdLeg Suite, and it is primarily for Google Ads. We also have VidHorder, which is specifically for YouTube Ads. So between the two things, there's a lot of different capabilities that we offer our users. Things related to identifying keywords, negative keywords, generating copy for ads, finding YouTube placements, etc. I don't expect that you would know what all those terms mean, but the important thing is that we have a lot of users who do and actually care and are already using the product. So just to give you one real life example of how it might work, let's say that I had developed some kind of tool that I want to sell to other web developers for them to use in their own projects, and I want to advertise it to them on YouTube. One way of doing that would be to go through and find specific videos you want to advertise on. If you were going to do this manually, you have to go through, copy links. It's very long, very tedious process. Nobody wants to do that. With our tool, we can give you 500 results, export it to a spreadsheet full of all the links, and it's done within 10 seconds. So it's a huge time-saving feature, and that's just one of the many ways people can use our tools. Kyle?
Yeah, so just real quick on the big plan here and why we're seeking the funding. We currently have 93 active users. It's a $49 a month software. And really what's going to keep driving this is developing the software to be better and better, which is going to attract more users and also get users to stay on longer. The current active subscription length is about 4 months. So we want to extend that by developing better and better features. So we'll be using the funds for marketing and advertising and for development, which we really just see as a virtuous cycle. As we have more users, we want to keep investing in development, which can keep attracting more and more users and just make the software better. So I guess Brandon's going to get into more details of the financial request. But the key thing is we already have people using it. People love the tools, and we want to keep providing this And of course, the nature of this is that it's worldwide. We have customers all over the world who are using this and bringing the revenue here into Grand Forks.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Committee members, any questions for Mr. Nordland or Mr. Solarud or Mr. Bombach on the finance?
And I can outline the financial description really quickly. It is for the full amount of the request at $40,000, and that would require that they have $10,000 of their own dollars or own money to put into the project. And with the change we just voted on here, that'd be $30,000 coming from the Grand Forks Growth Fund. Now that's at 5% interest over 5 years, but it doesn't begin to amortize until after year 1, so that gives them a first year deferred principal and interest per the program. This is a really great example of an idea, a business that wouldn't be traditionally financeable through a standard lending criteria at banks, but we can add value with this city program. We hope that they get started here and then go back to that sector and get the financing they need for future growth. This has met all the program requirements. They've worked with the Small Business Development Center to put together the business plan and the financials. They have gone through the loan committee and gotten approval on January 8th, and they're here as far as the second step of that 3-step process. Be looking for your approval to carry it onto the JDA later tonight.
Very good. The kind of entrepreneurial activity we were hoping for when the JDA supported the 701 and started the Startup Grand Forks Loan Program. Questions, Mr. Wolf, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Nordland, Mr. Solarud, thank you for being here. This is exciting. As Mr. Nordland, you're right, I probably don't fully understand this, but it sounds pretty cool, and appreciate you being here in our region. As you look to moving forward, 2021, what are some high-level goals that you guys want to accomplish? I understand you want some money for the marketing, advertising, maybe product development, that type of stuff, but high-level milestones that you would like to accomplish in 2021, any commentary on that?
The main thing at this point is just to pull on more subscribers and to get us to a point where we can actually hire another full-time developer. So I am a developer by trade. That's primarily what I'm bringing to the team, whereas his company is focused on marketing. But I have worked with some people actually through the intern Grand Forks program also, and people that I've become good friends with and would love to hire and keep them here in Grand Forks also. So that's kind of one of our bigger goals in the next year plus.
Very good. Thank you.
Anything further? Yes, Mr. Curry, please.
I'm going to piggyback off of Mr. Wolf there as well. It's kind of above me from a technicality standpoint, but I think it's awesome. A quick question, just the dollars, and obviously you want to expand your subscriber base. Was that, you talked about the different features, so is the development aspect trying to increase the niche of like what you have for current subscribers, or create new features to bring in a whole new realm of subscribers? So if that kind of makes sense. Are you trying to expand your current base more, or are you trying to open up a whole new realm to a different base? And then following up on that, do you have any kind of projections on what you guys see for the next 3, 5, 10-year subscriber base total numbers of subscribers?
Yeah, so the development is really to serve our existing customer base at a higher level. We're only serving 93 people out of tens of thousands of people who are advertising on YouTube, hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, advertising with Google Ads. So we're not necessarily needing to try to reach different types of people. We just want to reach the same people in a more attractive way. As far as high-level goals, I don't know. We don't think too far ahead. Our next milestone really is just going to be like 10,000 a month in recurring subscriptions, and beyond that, there's a lot of potential with this, I know, but we try to keep fairly modest goals in the short term, and really just try to make sure that this can be a self-funding thing, where the money that we're spending on advertising, we're getting that back within a couple of months, and then able to continue fueling the development.
I'll say for some of the projections that we did put together, we started with just kind of a modest goal of hitting roughly 20 new subscribers a month. And in our projections, we were actually utilizing paid ads to accomplish that. We haven't spent a dime on ads, and we're consistently hitting about 15 a month right now. So we're confident that we're going to easily surpass the projections that we already have, which I think within a year, 2 years, like we could definitely have a few hundred subscribers. And by being able to pour a lot more gas on the fire with this loan, we're hoping we can go way faster than we had even dreamed.
Ms. Whitney, did you have?
Mr. Nordland, it's just love hearing about the collaboration and the connection down at the 701 and how your journey's going. So with that $10,000 a month goal and 20 new subscribers each month, how does that take into account right now your churn is about 4 months on those subscribers? How does that all, how does that work financially for you, and or what thoughts have you had for that value add? I think you mentioned, trying to add a feature to keep them longer. So what might be some of those potentials, and obviously you may not know it there, but what might be some of those potential add-ons for that value add to hold on to them longer than 4 months so you don't have the churn?
Yeah, a couple of different ideas that we've had are we can take a user's search history and preemptively find things that might be attractive to them. Obviously, there's new stuff published on YouTube every single day, millions of hours of video all the time. So there's plenty of new content to be advertising on, so we can proactively send that to users. And we are putting some of the groundwork in place that would probably drive that right now. Other things would be potentially other types of exclusive training courses and stuff. Kyle has put together several training courses already and does a whole lot of successful business based off of that, and that would be a great way to provide some retention qualities that our software doesn't currently have.
Thank you.
Very good. We have a long agenda, but Mr. Kavami, please.
Just a quick question. Is there a revenue or a user goal that would allow you to bring on that third person?
Yeah, we have it outlined. I think it was roughly 15,000 a month revenue. I'd have to, sorry, I'm trying to pull up my screen right now. I don't think I can find it quickly. But yes, we have that pegged at around 300 users, 15,000 a month recurring revenue.
Some very positive responses from committee members.
Yeah.
Any chance that we could have a motion?
Yeah, I'd move approval.
Have a motion from Mr. Kavami,
Second.
second from Mr. Crary. And any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen. Next item, 4C, application from Amy's Place LLC. Mr. Bombach and Ms. Burns. Welcome, Ms. Burns.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you, committee members. I'm just as excited to bring this application forward. Amy Burns has been doing a lot of work and a lot of homework here and has identified an opportunity at the Grand Forks Air Force Base at the Base Exchange. She plans to bring in a restaurant to serve homemade entrees, among other things. She has been paying attention to what has been a reduction in service on the Air Force Base for quite some time that has really culminated to a strong lunch hour, which actually gives an opportunity to focus her business plan around the lunch hour. And so Amy's here with us to give us a little sneak peek as to what she's planning.
Great. Hi, it's good to see some of you guys again and some of you guys for the first time. I'm Amy. So basically what our major agenda and plan is here is open up a restaurant on the Grand Forks Air Force Base. That's definitely where I would like to start. We've already got a captivating audience already there, begging for new options, and right now options are so limited anyway. So it's just kind of a really good way to get started without having to just advertise yourself, because they're waiting. Basically what we want to do is create homemade entrees. And we're going to, while there will be some things every day that will be staples that people can see every single day, we're going to run off of everyday, like different lunch, entree, dinner specials. So what that will actually be really great for is every day there's new items. So that way I can continue to gain that same customer over and over and over, and just really be able to supply a lot of different options there on the base. Also create homemade desserts. There's nothing like that going on there already, which is really nice. There's also nothing going on there already where that's serving the type of food that I'm having. We'll be located inside of the business exchange. So there's already going to be a lot of people coming in and out of there already. And then starting out during lunch, as Brendan described, there's already a captivating audience right there that needs that. And to really work as far as building up time to really be able to get that clientele to move into other areas. Because right now that's where the base is struggling. They don't have a lot of restaurants open simply because they don't have the crew members to be able to maintain those. So I want to really start out to where I can really focus on making sure that I can stay positive and gain that revenue during that crisis. But I'm eventually going to move into breakfast, serving breakfast and specialty coffee throughout the day, and then look forward in the next year to moving into dinner service as well. Currently, other than the dining facility, there is no dinner options on base at all. So that's going to be a really good way to really just be able to capture some more revenue there. In the next year, then what I want to do is move into actually a catering service as well. That way I can start taking money off of the base and start moving it and gaining it from people in Grand Forks as well, and just to really be able to capture some more revenue.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Burns.
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Baumbach?
I would just add that it's a similar structure. She's looking to utilize the entirety of the loan program at $40,000 with $10,000 of her own contribution. She's really done her homework on this and worked with the Small Business Development Center to put together very specific uses. She's met the program requirements, including approval from the loan committee on January 8th.
Questions or comments from committee members? Hearing none? Yes, Mr. Wolf, please.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Burns, for being here and the idea. So I'm assuming you'd be leasing space, it sounds like, to start, and starting with lunch, and I like how you're starting and you've got a plan going beyond that. But is the sources uses the $40,000, that gives you enough upfront investment to get started and also get to revenue generation where you're actually doing the lunches, is that correct?
It does, yes. Okay. The majority of what the funding's being requested for, obviously, is for equipment. So a lot of that money will go into equipment. Some will go into some remodeling and renovation of the space there. While it will be leasing it, they just basically give you a blank canvas, and that's as far as they go. Sure. But they will also be responsible for the repairs. What'll be really nice as far as the way that the BX operates is my rent amount is 10% of my sales. So that really kind of helps getting up off the ground too, if it starts out and just really needs that boost as far as getting motivated, because my rent will fluctuate depending on how my sales operate.
Sure, thank you. And maybe my other final question is, as you look forward and looking to build off what you're starting, do you have points where it's, when I get to this point, then I'm going to look to add breakfast? When I get to this point, I'm going to look to dinner, and how do you get there? Are you that far in your business plan?
I am, yes. I have right now, it's set out in my pro forma as well as my business plan to start breakfast on month 3. And then I'm looking at 12 months for dinner. Mostly just be able to have and be able to afford the employee staff, as well as hoping more are available. The great thing about the base is not only is there already that audience there, but their agenda and their goal right now is to expand over the next year as far as adding more troops there as well, which will also give me more opportunity to be able to staff it. I don't want to run into a situation to where, honestly, you overpromise and underdeliver just because there's not employees to be able to maintain.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Kavami, yes.
Just a quick question. Do you already have your lease with the base written up, and are you approved to be a tenant there?
I am. All the approvals are already done, and actually signed the lease on February the 2nd.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate what you're doing. Move approval.
I have a motion from Mr. Kavami. For a second?
I'll second.
Have a second from Mr. Wolf. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Very good. Congratulations. Thank you, Ms. Burns. And the Growth Fund Committee makes recommendations to the JDA. This will be going forward to the JDA at 5:30 this afternoon. But we do most of the heavy lifting down here and then take it up for final approval to the JDA. So thank you. And this is another nice connection between the community, the city of Grand Forks, and the base. So best of luck to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys for the opportunity.
Now, moving to item 5. And for the record, can we note that we've been joined by Ms. Dockler too, please. Item 5, economic development funding and priorities. This is presentation only. Ms. Richards?
Actually, Mr. Weber, I'm going to lead this one out.
Very good.
Okay?
Thank you.
And again, we may not get through all of it tonight, but we see this as an introduction this evening. And so I'm going to start the presentation, and then we're going to go to Mr. Lund. Then Mr. Schill's going to talk about market capture, and then finally Maureen's going to go over some of the details of on the spreadsheets of these particular funds. I think it's comes at a great time where we have an expanded committee with Ms. Whitney and Mr. Curry. If you look at this particular fund, we should never take this for granted, but this fund is going to allow us to really move to the next level. You know, we're 20 plus years past the flood, and we're going to see some of the fruits that are going to come from the early investments after the flood. And as we move forward, we're looking at similar to what we're doing, and many of you have been involved in the 4 mixed-use projects we're working on incentives, $100 million worth of redevelopment. And in a similar way, we're looking how do we become more aggressive regarding this particular portfolio. So we're going to discuss some shifts. I think this is further important because we wanted to get to the growth fund sooner rather than later, because we start putting together budgets for both 2163 and 5996 on behalf of Mayor Buchensky. We're going to start that in the relatively near term, work through the spring, and then the city council begins to see that over the summertime. So this is really important for us to get feedback sooner rather than later as we start to look at a shift in how we do business.
Mr. Phelan, I apologize for interrupting. We've got the report. Okay, you're going to you're sharing it there. Very good.
Can you all see that out there?
Might be okay. Some can see it. I've got it pulled up on another screen. Can other committee members see this all right?
I cannot. Is it in the agenda, or is there something else that can be provided?
It is in the agenda. It was just added to the agenda recently, but
maybe Cheryl,
maybe you can make the screen large.
I think we can here.
Also, if individual committee members go to the view option in the top right corner and click on speaker view, when Mr. Phelan is speaking, that will be the largest.
Is it better for you folks?
Yes.
Okay, good. Again, not to say we've got about, we usually try to conclude about quarter after, plus or minus. And just so you guys know, this is a continuation. So we really want to start at the Growth Fund meetings as this kind of a survey, get some further feedback, and come back at future Growth Fund meetings as we work through February, March, and get your further input and feedback on this. So this isn't the last time you'll see this. So really, the first part is this fund has been really more heavy on land and facilities. And so really the shift has become, how do we look at some losses in revenue on the rent side, and how do we move forward in more of a growth perspective? And really, when we speak of growth, how do we grow the economy and not just have healthy growth fund balances, but how do we move the needle in strategic areas like the tech sector, to move workforce development, to move economic capacity in our community where we have lakes. So that's really the intent of a lot of these programs. You saw it start up Grand Forks. We've partnered on lift funds with Taylor-E and Airtonomy. And so those are the kind of the first move outs on trying to be more aggressive and not just having nice cash balances, which are great, but how do we move the needle on our economy and grow the economy. These are the two funds, and Maureen will go through these in more details, but really we do a lot of our great community and economic development activities through our 1 cent sales tax that's perpetual. And so currently right now, and we shifted a little bit of this 2 years ago, so 30% of that 1 cent goes to infrastructure, 18.5 is in economic development, and 51.5% to general fund property tax relief. Mayor Brown shifted this 2 years ago, and I think Mayor Buczynski would really like us to be even more aggressive, moving back more towards economic development. So previous to Mayor Buczynski, we did shift some to property tax relief from economic development, and there's going to be a move as we look at different models. How do we add more back to economic development? 2163 is really, I call it the city's economic development fund, and as you can see, it funds a range of opportunities from funding the Economic Development Corporation, the Air Force Base, infrastructure growth, and strategic initiatives. And a lot of those have been workforce development driven, where we've expanded what we've done. And of course, the quality of life, from beautification to arts to special events. So a lot of things that happen in the city of Grand Forks, to be frank, from events and beautification and arts, they wouldn't be happening without the city of Grand Forks investing in those activities. And then on the other side is 5996, and this is more meant as our revolving loan fund. And that's what the Growth Fund Committee is about. How do we look at these particular loans? How do we look at some of the other projects that we're working on? Really goes through 5996. We do budget these through the mayor's budget, both of these particular funds, as we move forward. This is the portfolio, and we'll have some discussions on that. And Mr. Wolf, you've talked a lot about, what's our portfolio and on our particular JDA and our growth fund. So this is where we sit today, and Maureen will go over that in particular. And you can see it spreads out from land to buildings to a significant amount of cash that we're going to have to reinvest. And then Keith's going to talk a lot about the high-risk loans and the low-risk portfolio and directions we want to go. And then on the right side of the slide is kind of what those dollar amounts range from in this particular fund. One thing we're shifting from, where we are shifting, as Mr. Kavami said, we're shifting from some of the properties that we did have as part of the portfolio in 1996 to entice Cirrus to come to town. There was a building and a buyout, and as you all well know, they did take the buyout in the adjacent property next to Cirrus, and so that was concluded on earlier here in January. And you can see the whole goal of that building was, number one, to keep Cirrus here, to keep them expanding as they have. And our future goal should be really to continue to have them expand in that location, and that was really our intent. Corporate centers, this is, as was discussed, this was a post-flood. How do we maintain our core of our downtown, and how do we maintain core businesses? And that was Alaris, that was Brady Martz, and the law firm. And so what we're looking at, and it's two parts. There's Corporate Center 1, and Corporate Center 1 is the larger building with those three tenants. They have condos as part of their, and the buyout can commence in 2021, so we're looking to move forward with that. Corporate Center 2, which previously we discussed Kitsona, and we have two commercial tenants on the second and third floors. That's a building in which we can sell on its own, but we want to make sure we work those in concert and integrate both Corporate Center 1 and 2, and our goal is to move those forward off the city's tax rolls at this point and get them into private sector's hands this particular year. I want to make a note on Corporate Center 1 and 2, that 9 to 10 million that we have estimated. About a third of that goes back to CDBG because that was the funding source. About 2/3 of that would go back to the growth fund, and so that was how that was funded. A lot of that was funded with EDA grant funds, just so you know the difference on that. So it won't all come back to the growth fund, but certainly we're going to try to leverage some of those funds to move forward with some of our future investments. Looking forward, as we talked, we are going to lose some rental income, and as we move forward, we're going to try to strategize with that 1 cent sales tax. How do we drive more funds to economic development without hurting property tax portion of that sales tax and without impacting infrastructure that's important to our community too. So we're going to be looking at doing that. As Mayor Buczynski has arrived, let's be more aggressive, and I can see with the 4 projects that I talked about in the downtown and UND, we're being more aggressive. But our aggressiveness is being built on the further growth that we've seen pre-pandemic, and we should be we're one of the fortunate communities that is looking at having projects coming out of this pandemic that are bigger and better and more broad than we're going into the pandemic, and we should be very thankful for the place that we are in this particular time. Again, Keith's going to talk about we're going to talk about asset shift. Keith's going to talk about the loan shift. And along the way, we really want your input as we move through kind of our shift in mentality from where we're going at this particular time. As part of our investments, we really have focused a lot on how do we grow the economy, and workforce development has been a big deal. And so this growth fund in JDA did invest in the Nisler's College of Business and Public Administration as part of our workforce development center. And it was not just a city/growth fund investment, but it's really a Grand Forks a community investment in a workforce development center. How do we have a place on campus that can engage with the University of North Dakota, whether it's workforce development, whether it's research, whether it's other investments on campus. So that's really the intent of that. Obviously the building is going up currently, and we will want to make sure that we staff that appropriately, we invest in it appropriately, and we have specific programming that will go on. The other is the Herald building. We have, per the growth fund in JDA, we have submitted an EDA construction grant. We've gotten some really positive feedback. We anticipate coming back to the growth fund and the JDA with good news here in the next month or two that we have received that. So it's our entire goal that we can move forward with the Grand Forks Herald building as that tech center, tech accelerator, as part of a broader downtown tech hub as we move forward. So those are some exciting things. Keith's going to talk about not only it's the infrastructure of the building, the programming and the personnel. Keith's going to come up here and talk about some of the investment tools that we need to really move forward with the tech sector and in a sector that we have lagged our competitors. About 5 or 6 years ago, this was a really our large highlight. And when we talk about we've done quite well in manufacturing, one of the reasons why we've done well in manufacturing is when the EDC staff said, what do we need to do to move the needle on manufacturing? Feedback we received is that we need land that's available, and not only land that's available, but that's available with infrastructure. And so what we went upon then, using growth fund dollars, partnering with the Bank of North Dakota, low interest long-term debt financing, we opened up several areas, mainly in our western, northwestern, and our southwestern areas of our city. And so the green locations along Gateway Drive are north of Simplot, highlighted by the development of Red River Biorefinery. Along Gateway Drive heading out to the airport, highlighted by Steffes, is out there, and that was to open up infrastructure in that area. The area further south as we move off of Demers Avenue is our water treatment plant site, and it's not only our water treatment plant site, but we set up infrastructure so that could be a further industrial location for others associated with our water treatment plant. The blue area is our business park, and that's where not only the growth fund buy land, we also invested in infrastructure so that we would have city-ready land with infrastructure that we could even move quicker. So, and then the final piece is the I-29 South area, and that's south of Revolutions, where we've also put in some infrastructure highlighted by Iron Heights. So all those green areas are areas where let's put in infrastructure was partnered with the private sector, and the blue area was our business park that we would have land with ready, able infrastructure to move forward. So that was a strategy. We've paused on that. So we've worked several years in that area to get that ready. And I think it's bolstered our manufacturing and really not only having business, but really growing the jobs in the manufacturing area. And I think we can pause on that and get back to other types of areas where we've lagged, whether it's in tech and other areas, because we've built out the city in many areas over the last several years. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Keith.
Mr. Lund, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Weber. Mr. Phelan, I'd like to start, well, thank you for giving me a few moments to speak today. I'd like to first welcome Amy Whitney and Russell Curry to their first Growth Fund Committee meeting today, and I really thank them for their willingness to serve and bring their talents to this effort. Wanted to give you just a quick overview of some of the things we've been talking about. It's not even a 101, it's a 1. In terms of the EDC, in terms of our mission to expand economic opportunity for the Grand Forks region through industry growth and diversification, and I think that the last part of that sentence is important, industry growth and diversification. And that's done primarily through the primary sector, which is still our primary mandate in terms of the EDC. Our main focus is 50% of our resources, in addition, in excess of 50% of our resources are directed to business development. We also perform marketing function on behalf of the region from a business development standpoint and a workforce attraction standpoint, but really the EDC's primary mandate is business development. We do that in targeted sectors. Manufacturing, as Mr. Freeland indicated, we've had strong growth even through the pandemic. Agribusiness has been our largest sector in terms of capital investment over the last decade, and so I guess I consider those to be our traditional or legacy sectors. Unmanned and autonomous systems, or UAS, we're all fairly familiar with that. That's been growing both in terms of jobs and companies operating in our region. And technology is sort of our last targeted sector, and that's a bit aspirational. Mr. Phelan talked about lagging our peers. We actually have a location quotient of just a little north of 30%, so 30% of a typical region's concentration of technology jobs. And we feel, I think, collectively that we need to do a better job in growing companies and maintaining and attracting workforce in that areas to grow that sector. That truly is how we diversify our economy. We're really excited about Mayor Brzezinski's vision and leaning into the tech sector and with a tech accelerator in the Grand Forks Sherwood building, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of those conversations and a part of that initiative. Mr. Phelan asked me to go over some of the tools that we have typically used, both in terms of low risk and high risk, and the low risk tools are fairly familiar to you, I think, and I would say that they are either partnering with traditional financing or traditional financing in their very nature. The PACE program, which provides an interest subsidy for primary sector opportunities. That program was created in the late 1980s in response to really a collapse of the oil and gas industry in North Dakota at that time. After the flood of 1997, the city received $2 million from the Economic Development Administration to capitalize a revolving loan fund that the local growth fund matched at 10%, and ultimately was created. That fund was used initially for flood recovery type of work, and after those funds were initially returned, they really are operating a sort of a subset of your revolving loan fund with a little bit more restrictions that come along with the federal product, but again, really resembles traditional financing. FlexPace was a program created by the Bank of North Dakota, I'm going to say somewhere around 15 to 20 years ago, primarily in response to smaller communities across the state, recognizing that the opportunities in their communities look a little different from the large metro areas, and in the sense that sometimes a grocery store or Main Street businesses are economic development, so that was created. The Growth Fund has embraced that for rural communities, so Rural FlexPace, which I think is a local title, so we're supporting those types of things in rural communities, not the city of Grand Forks and Grand Forks County, and then also adopted the Bank of North Dakota's daycare FlexPace program to support the expansion of daycare in the Grand Forks region. So those are the tools, and there may be others, but those are the high-level tools that we have used. Really, I've been with the EDC nearly 15 years now, and those are the primary tools that we bring forward with projects. We're here to talk a little bit about, I think, sort of start the conversation about maybe stepping into some higher risk and higher return loans and some opportunities, and those would be categorized by the startup program. I don't think I need to go through that in much detail. We talked about the changes of the program a short time ago, and then I guess I'll call them at this point lift type loans, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide, and those are early stage companies with high growth potential. Okay. I wanted to just highlight, I think most of us are familiar with the LIFT program, Innovation Technology Loan Fund, that was approved a little under 2 years ago at the last legislative session. That was a $15 million loan fund that was created to help support commercial technology commercialization in the state of North Dakota. And Grand Forks, there was a $15 million fund, as I mentioned. Grand Forks was fortunate to have 8 companies receive $5.2 million of awards of that program. So that represents 35% of the funding and 42% of the companies. So Grand Forks, I guess, outpunched their weight when it comes to that program, and we're very proud of the companies that are listed and the growth potential that that we may realize. And as you recall, we did a few sort of lift-type loans to a couple of exciting companies, 2 of them that emerged from that group, Airtonomy and Tailory. Those loans are on the books today. And we hope to do more of those. And there was a lot of discussion about doing more of that, but really about creating a program that was scalable and that was repeatable. So all of those discussions, those 2 loans really inspired a conversation with the EDC board and some city leadership in terms of a program, a working title called Accelerate Grand Forks. We like it because it mirrors the mayor's vision and things. So the title is open to change should the program continue, and that's what we're calling it at the moment. It's similar to the support that the Growth Fund provided for Autonomy and Tailory. Would be debt financing. There are many that appreciate the fact that we would preserve a position as a creditor rather than taking equity position up front until more is known about the opportunity. Lift type terms that are outlined here, which are 2% interest, which is deferred for 3 years, so really it's no interest for 3 years and 2% interest over the final 2 years. 5-year term with really a balloon payment at the end of that 5 years. No personal guarantees. There's a lot of competition for this capital, and there's a lot of capital that's available in other geographies across the United States. And this is to work a little like equity, but really, again, preserve that position as a creditor. And then possible conversion to equity or pre-equity. We did some options for the Growth Fund to convert to a SAFE agreement. Won't go into the details of that, and there's opinions on both sides of that, but I think options to convert to something in the future would be advisable should something like this move forward. And also we think that should something like this move forward, enhanced due diligence is needed. The Growth Fund Committee, the EDC board, I'm not sure that we have the wherewithal to dive deep into these projects, and I think there should be a group that was put together to do that due diligence and bring in experts as necessary to do really analysis of the technology, of the company, and even the entrepreneurs themselves. Again, I'd like to give credit to Mr. Wolf in terms of talking about, I'm not sure how many times we heard the question, what's our portfolio and what's our strategy? So thanks, Mr. Wolf, for getting us to this point. Taking a look at our portfolio, stepping into this, thinking maybe it's reasonable that we carve out 10% of that portfolio to be higher risk loans. And the portfolio that Mr. Phelan outlined, I think with Marine's support, outlined about a $40 million portfolio. And should that be the case, a $4 million carve out in terms of investing in high risk, high return loans. And those returns may or may not be financial. I think the high return we're looking at is diversification of the economy. So, and then we talk about where those deal flows come from. So, and pardon me, loans that would be classified, at least in sort of early discussions, would be Accelerate Grand Forks loans, should this move forward, as well as a startup program. And by very nature, the lack of personal guarantee would categorize them as such, and they're earlier stage companies in general. And then in terms of deal flow, we had great success, as we talked about, or reasonable success through the LIFT program. So there's a proposal at the legislature, a couple of them, but the one that has the most legs, I think, is a proposal to recapitalize that program at $25 million this biennium. So there's current and future LIFT awardees. There's a current pipeline of projects and companies that Mr. Bombach in particular is visiting with, somewhere between 4 and 6 that we think might be candidates. And then also business attraction. And I guess I can't emphasize enough that, if we have the culture and the ecosystem, which includes infrastructure such as the tech accelerator, and then the capital to support these companies, those are all recipes that go towards supporting a growing ecosystem, growing tech companies, and the diversification of our economy. So that was very quick. I spoke very quickly, as I'm known to do. We certainly hope that this conversation can continue into the future, and a program like this or something similar could be moved forward to support the exciting vision of the mayor and moving forward. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lund.
Chairman Weber,
go ahead.
Just because I'm looking at the clock now, and What we're going to plan to do is ask Mark Schill to give that market capture briefing, which I think is very important because this growth fund invested about $50,000 of that $90,000 study, just to give a recap, which I think really was intended to grow the tax base here to do all the great things. And then at the next growth fund meeting, we'd have Maureen come back and talk about some of the details of 21623 and 5996. So that we can spend some more time talking about the details. So with that, I'd ask, if you're okay with that, I'd ask Mark Schill to kind of conclude us.
Very good. I just point that in relation to Mr. Lund's presentation, I hope committee members will consider 10% for high-risk loans. Is that enough, or should we be thinking a different amount? But that's for later discussion. Mr. Schill, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Weber and members of the committee. So today, just a real quick summary of the market capture project, but also, how it fits within the overall strategy for economic development and the growth fund within the community. So why do we embark on this work? Well, of course, these businesses help improve quality of life and attract people to the community. They attract visitors, but just as importantly, it helps sustain this commercial tax base that preserves revenue for the public sector, all the taxing entities. But also, these businesses are capturing sales tax, which what we just heard is the funding stream for a lot of this economic development work, right? And so capturing this is absolutely critical. This effort's been led by a series of partners. It's been a great collaboration and, of course, funded significantly, as Mr. Phelan mentioned, by the city of Grand Forks. And so we know that in the past 5 or so years, we've seen a significant decline in retail, right? But what isn't known so much is if you back up 5 years, there was a boom in retail just previous to that. And so when you look at what happened with the exchange rate, the trend in the exchange rate really coincides. So the rate hit $1 here with the Canadian dollar. The last month of it being $1 was here, and it was 90 cents here. And so we can see that external impact of what's happened in that international money market really impacting the local business. The other point, though, is that this is not just a Grand Forks issue. This is happening across the region. Here's the same curve for Fargo, right? A similar trend. Maybe not as significant at that time, but very similar. So when we look at before the pandemic through March, 10 years, Grand Forks ended up basically back where it started 10 years ago, flat on retail. Over 5 years, it doesn't look so good, but yet things were starting to rebound prior to the pandemic. A little bit of manufacturing growth, retail growth was occurring. Now, if we include the pandemic through November, which is the latest information, we've actually seen a rebound in retail in Grand Forks in the last 3 to 5 months. So now, in the 5-year time frame, Grand Forks looks better than the rest of the state, and a little bit better over that 10-year time period as well. And so context matters when we look at these things, but a lot of what's happened is these external factors have impacted the market, right? The exchange rate, a poor ag economy. UND had significant layoffs fueled by the oil boom. We saw the national retail apocalypse. We saw dominance of certain retailers and others like Shopko and Gordon's not doing very well. We're seeing the growth of online shopping. And I think now down in Fargo, an Amazon fulfillment center may cut Amazon shipping times into Grand Forks, which might have impact on the retail market. Then, of course, the pandemic. Yet, after all that growth and decline, if we compare retail sector to the rest of the nation, which is this line, we're still 16% above average in retail jobs in this community. And so it peaked out at the top of that peak at 30% above, but we're back to roughly where it was 15 to 20 years ago after that boom and recoil. And so we can look at the same concept, breaking it down by industry, 2.5 times the sporting goods sector size, very strong in home improvement. Restaurants are roughly average. Yet some are lagging pretty significantly. Clothing is down, but amusement and recreation, museums and attractions, very low. When you look at growth, one thing just to point out here is the biggest negative growth factor is actually a sector called non-store retailers. And what we think that is Amazon shifting their customer service employees to contract work. So again, this context really matters when we look at that overall retail shift. So the broader context really matters too in terms of what's happened over the last 30 or so years. And this region's economy has been marked by all these external shocks. The missile wing was closed in the 90s. The flood and fire, that's this decline. We see that the tankers left the community. Then we had the Great Recession. Then we had these issues we just spoke of and then of course COVID, right? And so, yet the trend has remained somewhat up after all. You know, I can't think of another place that has had all these major negative impacts in the community. So I think there's reason to be optimistic. So with this project, it is data focused, but there are these other 5 areas in the strategic plan for the market capture work that the community is working on. And so when we look at the data, what we found was the pool was very deep. And so what we ended up doing was building a series of interactive data tools and making those available to our service providers and the public. And so we looked at the locals, who lives here, who visits for day trips, who visits overnight. And then it's all broken down in this idea of customer segmentation, these 71 different buckets from Experian, looking at the types of people that live in this community. And so the data is broken up, and this is an example of one of the tools. Here's the people that visit for day trips across these 71 segments. Here's the people that visit overnight. You can see it's 2 different distinct groups, right? And so that's what we're looking at, is the types of people. The people that come overnight tend to be much more affluent, for instance. We looked at seasonality. See, these charts look basically the same for the overnights and the day trippers. So roughly the same people are visiting by season. Looking at where visitors are coming from. Interestingly, Minneapolis Twin Cities is the #1 source of visitors, about 25%. Another 23% from Fargo, but 75% of the people that stay overnight live within 300 miles of the community. Cutting it by parts of the community, what's interesting, the Alaris Center, of those that visit the Alaris Center, more than half shop at 32nd, more than half stay in a hotel. Of those that go downtown, 2/3 shop at 32nd, and 40% stay in a hotel. So the hotel, or the Alaris and downtown, are driving business. And we use 32nd here just as a proxy for the rest of the regional economy. Here's a look at the local market from one of the tools. We use this information to drill down and say, okay, who are we looking at? Who are the focus areas? What are the top groups? Of course, students is one, but this one really stuck out, which is active young families. These are the different demographic groups according to Experian. We think this could be a potential target market. So all this information is currently available on the Chamber's website, a series of 10 or so different data tools. There's been a lot of work done to get this into the hands of businesses and service providers. So then we have the impact of the pandemic, right? So it's been different across different sectors. So we're looking just as a baseline, 6 states. Food and beverage and Target and Walmart have done okay, yet bars, amusement, hotels, restaurants don't look okay, right? Big difference. Grand Forks is done generally better, even in the hospitality hit in the pandemic, than places across the region. And yet they're still down 20% in the restaurant sector. And so I think what's important is the pandemic impacts are not, they're very uneven. Manufacturing, again, has continued to see growth through the pandemic. That's great. Retail has done fine, it's grown. Other local services has grown. Leisure and hospitality is still down. So, but what we found in this analysis, though, is that events and attractions are significantly driving business to these the local operators. So here we're looking at foot traffic into hotels, into the malls, sporting goods, restaurants, and drinking places. And we've highlighted on this chart weekends where there's events. Huge spikes, for instance, in hotels at the KISS concert, right? So we can see this tremendous impact that attracting people and generating business has done. It's really leading to foot traffic in all of these other local hospitality, restaurant, and retailers. It's critical. But again, Grand Forks lacks in some of these attractions, right? So it's about average in spectator sports and performing arts. With the 2 arenas here, that makes sense, right? Yet amusement and recreation, 45% below average. Museums and other attractions, 72% below average, right? And so there's a big gap there. So again, this work is covering these 5 major strategic areas. There's a lot of work done getting this work into the hands of small businesses, this data. We've reached out to all the local service providers, the SBDC, the Center for Innovation. The CDB is leading efforts to promote visitation using this information. There's a group task force of citizens working on attractions and amenities and how do we find the best local ideas in this community and support it. And then we have discussions like we're having tonight, is how do we align policy and resources to support development. So Finally, again, it's important to look at this in terms of how does this fit with the broader economic development strategy? Well, yes, sustaining tax base, but also capturing these sales tax dollars. And I found it helpful to think about this in terms of a cycle, right? So up here is where the market capture work lives, supporting local business. Those local businesses are generating sales tax revenue. That sales tax revenue is then reinvested through the growth fund and other economic development partners or programs into primary sector traded industries, right? They're selling their wares outside the region and creating income from good jobs. Those dollars are then spent back into local businesses, right? And so all of this fits together, all of it feeds off each other. The EDC lives right down in this area doing this work. And the strategy is, and the strategy in economic development is, if we can do this really well, that can generate enough momentum around this cycle to keep things flowing. But that doesn't mean there isn't work that couldn't be done up here in market capture, in other local business development, right? And so that's how all of these things fit together. It's not saying the market capture replaces economic development. No, this work has been successful. We've seen that in the market, in the manufacturing sector growth. And this is what really generates the wealth and makes that pie bigger, instead of just saying, let's cut more and more pieces of the same size pie, right? So all these things work together symbiotically. And so I think that's where this work fits together. We're continuing to execute this strategy across these 5 planes. And I think some of this work can really feed into the community's overall economic development work.
Mr. Schill, pretty impressive to give us that fast version and still provide so much clarity. I apologize, though, that we didn't have more time. This was important information. Any quick questions for Mr. Schill? Otherwise, we're looking forward to hearing from you again at the next meeting when Ms. Storstad will give us the next part of this presentation, and we'll start considering next steps and what sort of decisions, recommendations would we be carrying forward to the JDA. Mr. Schill, Mr. Phelan, or Mr. Lund, anything further at this time?
No, thank you, Mr. Weber. And I think for the Growth Fund committee members, what we're going to try to do this year is bounce more and more ideas off you so that you can make our execution and decisions better and better. And so really that's the point of the Growth Fund committee, is to really refine and make what we're doing better. And so we'll try to feed you more strategic things that we're thinking about so that you can add more and more value to it, and not just be a transactional group where we send you. We want to get you out on the strategic end so that when some of these ideas come back, you've had your fingerprints on these. And I think it's an exciting time. We're going to